Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the conference after the coffee break. Welcome to the first plenary session on implementation of smart specialization strategies. It's great to be here in Riga. Thank you very much for the invitation by the Latvian presidency, by the State Education Agency and the Ministry for Education and Science. Now it is my pleasure to introduce to you our speakers and discussion participants of the first plenary session, who will discuss with you the fascinating concept of smart specialization in regions. So I would like to ask you to welcome with me Ms. Celina Viceva from DG Regio, Ms. Karen McGuire from the OECD, Mr. Günther Klar, the chairman of the Commission's expert group on smart specialization, and Mr. Andrea Conte from the Joint Research Center in Sevilla. The objective of this plenary session is to look a bit closer at smart specialization in regions, how it works, does it work? What are the tools to implement it? What are the tools to monitor and the implementation, the tools to adjust? I've asked the participants also to keep in mind in their presentations the regional perspective. We have representatives of the Commission, the OECD, an expert group to the Commission. They look a bit from, I don't want to say from Brussels, but they look a bit from the globally on the issue, and I asked them to also keep in mind how regions can benefit from the concept, how they see this smart specialization strategy, and I hope we can come to this also later in the discussion. The idea is to have our speakers introduce the topic, 10-12 minutes each, and then to engage in a discussion among themselves with you, depending on available time, depending on the topics that they will raise. So I'm very much looking forward to that, and I would first give the floor to Ms. Celina Viceva from DG Regio. She's a director for the Competence Center for Smart and Sustainable Growth, and also responsible for the implementation of cohesion policy in Southern Europe, Spain, Greece, Italy, and she also used to be responsible for the implementation of cohesion policy in Latvia, so she knows the place very well. So, Celina.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I would not save the time on to thank again the Latvian authorities for inviting us to this conference, for the excellent organization, for letting us in this very beautiful and historical place of the Latvian Society House, and also for the very warm hospitality yesterday in a very nice setting in Jurmala. Thank you very much. You've been very, very kind. Hopefully we will pay off with our contribution to the conference. Now, my role here is to talk a bit on the smart specialization process and where do we stand in it, and what's next, what are the important steps. Maybe I will first of all put the context and the overall setting of this concept. You know that the European Regional Development Fund and cohesion policy in general are there to bridge the gap in development between regions. How are we trying to do that, to push up the development, especially in the lagging region, through growth, through increase of competitiveness, through creation of jobs. And of course, more and more it is a unanimous it is an agreement and a unanimous statement that competitiveness, the shortcut to competitiveness, is through knowledge-based economy. So from this point of view, the European Regional Development Fund, and especially in the next programming period, is trying to put a very high focus on innovation, on research and development, but from the perspective of their contribution to growth. We realize that competitiveness is at stake in global terms. We realize that in order to sustainably exit from the crisis, we need sustainable competitiveness. And sustainable competitiveness, Europe cannot achieve through competing with labor cost or any other cost of materials. The only way we can compete is through new ideas, new technologies, new products, and being as adept to the market needs as possible. So from this perspective, innovation is in the core of our cohesion policy for the next period. And the first step in demonstrating this focus is how much money we project for research and innovation. And throughout the years, I have to say that this budget has been gradually increasing. If, for example, in 2006 period, it was only 6% for innovation, already in the 2007-13 period, we have 25%, and this time around, it's not only that the budget goes up, the consolidated budget, but also we are trying to reach higher quality, efficiency, effectiveness, synergy, and all these keywords that relate to the quality of spending. So there was a say already about these 40 billion that have been already allocated in the negotiation process. However, the negotiation process is still ongoing. We still need to negotiate 50 programs. Some of these programs have a very important budget in innovation. These are programs in Italy and Spain. So all in all, we will have a very substantive budget, over 40 billion, that will be tagged to the thematic objective of research and innovation. But immediately I will say that this is only the budget that strictly and exceptionally relates to the RIS3 process, which is the research and innovation smart specialization strategies. But we have also a big budget in thematic objective 3, which is support to competitiveness of enterprises, also related to innovation, or ICT, thematic objective 2, which is also research related, or low carbon economy. So all in all, if we put all that together, it will be well beyond 100 billion for the next 7-year period that could be linked very closely to research and innovation capacities. Now, that is about the budget. About the quality of spending, because we know that it's not enough to spend money. What is much more important, especially under circumstances of very limited public resources, to spend this money wisely. This time around, we really focused on prioritization. In this morning, Ms. Kyopo was asking the question of whether to spread money thinly or to concentrate. Our evaluations show, not only for innovation, that if we spend money thinly and spread it all over the place, it doesn't give results, the expected results, and it becomes invisible. In order to have visibility, we need critical mass, and we need to focus in the right strengths where the money will produce the best effect. And this is how the smart specialization process came up. We want to build and invest into the areas of innovation and research which can bring the most of the money that we spend. So that means to boost existing strengths, to boost emerging market opportunities, and to match them with the effort of the researchers and the innovation system in the regions and member states. One of the most important, I know that there will be a presentation specifically designed on the smart specialization process and the concept as such, but I would like to signal maybe the most important element. I said already that we want to translate research and innovation into economic growth. So our idea with the European Regional Development Fund is really to bridge the gap between the academic society and the business society. And this is the most important concept of entrepreneurial discovery that underlies the whole process of smart specialization. This entrepreneurial discovery meets all the stakeholders together of the triple, quadruple helix, and brings up the areas that will be in agreement between businesses and researchers where the funds should concentrate in order to have the best result for economy. So these smart specialization strategies, they became an ex-ante conditionality for spending our money in innovation and research. So we will not spend a euro beyond the areas that are there in the smart specialization strategies. And this is very important also in the context of the questions that I heard this morning, if a project can be eligible under thematic objective 1, research and innovation. So the quality of spending relates to where we invest, how much we prioritize, and of course, since our objectives relate to growth, how much it is close to the market needs. We want really to concentrate on the demand-driven innovation. And this is the different scope of Horizon 2020 and what we want to support with the European Regional Development Fund. Now, we are almost at the end of the negotiations. We set our programs, and now the most important stage comes where we have to put in practice all the good words in the programs that are there to ensure the quality of spending. How this implementation process will roll out. The first step is that we need to have this ex-ante conditionality implemented, because I have to say that in most of the cases there are still elements in the smart specialization process that are not there in many regions and member states. So we have to continue to perfect the strategy, the processes, the monitoring systems, everything that relates to this ex-ante conditionality. And this ex-ante conditionality is not just like this decided to be there. It is there to ensure efficiency. The next thing that we have to ensure is that the culture that we are trying to install through the entrepreneurial discovery is an ongoing process. We don't want that to end with the setting up of the strategies. It is even more important in the evolutionary process throughout the 7-10 years of implementation, so that this dialogue is not cut off afterwards, but it continues and continues to feed the system of the smart specialization. The next point, which is extremely important, is how we are going to identify, it's not even us, although I'm using the first person in my speech, it is the managing authorities, how they're going to identify the best projects. And here comes one of the tricky questions. In order to start selecting projects, you need selection criteria. The selection criteria have a crucial importance. They're approved by the monitoring committees, by the member states. Monitoring committees are formations of the member state where the managing authorities is one of the key stakeholders. And through the selection criteria, we have the project selected and being implemented. So that means that if we want, from the high strategic point through the program level, to reach the ground and get the right projects, to get the right results, the results we intend, then the selection criteria are the missing and most important channel, which is decided by the member states. So my plea here is, please participate as actively as possible in the process of designing the selection criteria, because under these selection criteria, the projects will be selected in the calls announced by the managing authorities. So selection criteria is the first thing. Then continuing the culture of dialogue, the second thing. Continue involving the entrepreneurial business community. These are elements on which our success depends. Third element, we need to be very serious about monitoring and evaluation. I have to say that one of the most important strengths for the next generation of our policy is result orientation. We want, from the very start, to know the results we want to achieve and to head to these results in the most efficient way. So for that we need monitoring system and very sound evaluation so that we can change in the meantime anything that does not work well, including in the innovation and research. So build the system appropriately. Many of the regions already have this system. Now it's the implementation modalities that need to be designed. 2 more minutes or 1 minute? 1.5. Synergies. On the synergy side, there was a talk this morning. This is embedded already in the smart specialization, in our programs, that we need to find the shortcut and the most effective way of working together between the funds. Horizon 2020, COSME, any of the fund that has a relevance to a thematic objective has to be in the picture, in the strategic picture, so that we don't have duplication and we use the funds for their appropriate purpose. If you remember from my commissioner statement, this is the right way to mobilize resources. Another point that is extremely important, again, within the frame of the high needs and the limited resources, we need a higher leverage, and the highest possible leverage can be one of the selection criteria, for example. Financial instruments in this respect are crucial. We have to spend our money only for the trigger effect. So if something can be supported via financial instrument, grant should not be given, and the managing authority should be there to decide on that. Last point, cooperation. Cooperation is an extremely important strength, but one of the most difficult. Outward-looking smart specialization strategies should be there to help cooperation and synergize across territories, across regions, across countries. Without referencing ourselves to the outer world, our smart specialization strategy will be outdated very, very soon. Thank you for your attention. Continuing with the questions afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jalina. As you said, we will come back to these points in the discussion. I think it was a very interesting presentation from the perspective of DG Regio on money, on the conditions for the managing authorities in the regions. I would like to give the floor to Andrea Conte from the Joint Research Center in Sevilla. He's an economist there, leading a team, I think, on stairways to excellence, and indeed monitoring and researching the implementation of smart specialization strategies, which can help us, I believe, tremendously to understand how well the concept functions.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really thank the organizer for this timely opportunity to discuss an important issue, the monitoring of the smart specialization strategy, which is becoming a true priority in this period of activity. So, my name is Andrea Conte. I'm coordinating one of the thematic activities of the Smart Specialization Platform, which is a joint activity run by the Directorate General Joint Research Center together with DG Regio since 2011, where we have helped regions, member states to strategically design and prepare the smart specialization strategies. I will make just a very brief introduction on the, let's say, narrative rationale of the overall concept before moving towards a more specific presentation linked to the monitoring. But since the audience is quite heterogeneous here, probably it's important to describe why we are there and what's the rationale of our activities since 2011. As we know, especially in this multi-annual financial framework in this period 14-20, as never before there is a thematic concentration towards knowledge-based investment activities linked to community funding. If we take the latest G-board available, the total gross expenditure in research and development for the whole EU 28, this is roughly equal to 92 billion euros per year. If we take over the 7 years the community budget linked to the different community funding programs, structural funds, Horizon 2020, and so on, this basically means that in the EU, €1 out of 10 is coming from community funding. So there is a twofold big objective there, which is, let's say, the rationale of our activity. First of all, we aim at cohesion policy, a fundamental issue linked to a self-standing union as the union that we want, but we go far beyond that by linking two objectives that, at least in the past, seem to be diverging, meaning cohesion and efficiency of spending. So we truly believe that we could reconcile those two important objectives at the EU level, at the smart specialization strategy as an ex-ante conditionality linked to one of the major drivers of economic growth, welfare in the EU has been decided for that reason. Spending, thematically concentrating investments in, let's say, converging regions towards knowledge-based investment is for the sake of the whole EU. It's a way we aim through the participatory process, the entrepreneurial discovery process we emphasize so much, we have been emphasizing in the preparation of the strategy. It will be one of the building blocks of the monitoring activities we have now, are done for the sake of making the endogenous potential of regions, the skillful, the most dynamic part of those regions, emerging and finding a path for self-development in those member states and regions which now are lagging behind. And this is not a regional exercise, it's an exercise made for the sake of the whole EU 28. What we are doing, the first important message is that the monitoring is not a novel exercise disconnected from the preparation of the strategies, which was the objective of the activity so far. There is a continuation, important linkages in the overall exercise that make us linking all the preparation to the implementation of the strategies so far. In our platform, we mainly act as a facilitator of the process. So we talk to managing authorities, to all other regional and national stakeholders which are involved in the innovation process, and we favor via our tools, both analytically and more, let's say, policy-oriented, communication, in-depth support to member states and regions which want to deepen knowledge and better target the objective under the S3 exercise. So we put a lot of emphasis with our partners in member states and regions on the preparation, during the preparation of the S3, on the monitoring aspect, because we consider since the beginning of the overall exercise this a crucial element of the overall strategy. In truth, what we are witnessing is that exactly those regional member states which have come up with the most sound analysis on the strategy are also those that have put already in place or have designed most effective mechanism for monitoring. So this is to reinforce the message that the two issues, the design on one side and the implementation and the monitoring on the others, are truly one important exercise. So, back on the issue of facilitating this exchange of knowledge, we provide, especially on the monitoring, we will provide in the coming month the results of a survey we have just launched to our contacts in regions and member states on the monitoring of the process. We will be in the position to provide those interested with good practices, data source, case studies, and in general methodologies, which will be used in our traditional, let's say, platforms, being peer learning, workshop, mutual learning conferences, where we put together people from different regions and member states to share experience on issues of interest for them. Why do we want a monitoring system for the S3? For three main objectives. We need a clear information on the development effects of the overall transformation process. This is linked to the, let's say, hard exercise in itself, the measurement. But there is a broader issue linked to to enhancing the participation of the relevant stakeholders. Only a transparent mechanism can create and build trust among the different participants in the regions and in the member states. And only in this way we can ensure a long-lasting relations throughout the whole programming period. In general, we need to condensate and unify the overall exercise that started from the planning of the overall strategies. The S3 logic of intervention. The logic of intervention which has been used in the smart specialization strategy design implementation so far has been, first of all, a recognition of what we call it the challenges and needs, evidence-based but with a relevant policy dimension in the selection of the elements, the formulation of the strategic objectives which we support a push for being as much as possible aligned to many of the EU level type of strategies, Europe 2020 and so on. So to make also more feasible linkages between different policies. The selection of elements at the regional levels that allows to meet the objectives. Here there is a clear distinction that we need to make between the so-called priorities and the policy mixes. In the priorities, in the smart specialization strategy, we have put a lot of emphasis on priorities, meaning on line of activities, knowledge, we call it knowledge, domain, and market niches. So we did not want to have a standard sectoral based type of policy intervention. We mostly aim at a, let's say, dynamic process through the EDP process, which has been mentioned before, which is a crucial element of the overall exercise at the regional level, for identifying activities, cross-sectoral, horizontal in scope, and not only that could support the emergence of the innovation potential in those regions. Now, in order to reach what we call it the expected results under the priorities, we will need to introduce policy mixes, the policy instruments that will need to be used for affecting the economy that in the way in which we aim. Therefore, it's important to make a distinction between what we call it result and output indicator. And this is the framework we will use in the monitoring exercise from now onwards. Result indicators will refer to the priorities, while output indicators will refer to the evaluation of the specific policy instrument or policy mix adopted in the context of the implementation of the strategies. We aim at a participatory process, transparent, therefore we support the use of indicators that could come from different sources, because we acknowledge a difficulty in many cases at the regional level in measuring some aspects which are not easily identified, that can be easily reachable via official statistics. So we also aim at progressing on the experimentation together with regions in the evaluation of the result indicator. In general, on both the results and the output indicators, we want co-ownership via the entrepreneurial discovery process with the relevant stakeholders in the territory. This has been done before in the identification of the priorities, in the design of the priorities. Now that we have to move on the implementation, we need this participatory process to be reinforced if possible, because it will be crucial for the overall success of the exercise. So I conclude on the monitoring with this, let's say, dashboard, the synthetic dashboard of the framework we will use. This is an example, I will not go through it, but that summarize somehow what we expect in terms of differences between result indicators and output indicators, and why it is important that the evaluation can be conducted between at two different levels, namely both at the priority level and at the policy level. We want to have a more transparent and effective way of rebuilding, let's say, causal chain that goes from the evaluation of the policy instrument to the overall reaching of the priorities set out in the smart specialization strategy. So we aim at this setting. We really look forward to collaborate with you for the success of the exercise. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Interesting presentation. I liked in particular the discussion on the indicators, the selection of indicators to determine the success of the strategies, and I hope we can come back to this point in a second as well. Karen Maguire is working at the OECD. She's the head of the Regional Innovation Unit of the OECD Regional Development Policy Division. We thought that we'd bring in someone from outside the EU to give an additional perspective to what we are discussing here among, I would say, among EU member states and sometimes even within our EU bubble. And I believe Karen has also a number of very interesting examples from outside the European Union on how regional innovation strategies, or as we call them, smart specialization strategies, are actually implemented and welcomed by local regional politicians. I'm looking forward, Karen.
Thank you. So as was mentioned, I'm from the Regional Development Policy Group within the OECD. There are lots of different areas within the OECD that work on themes related to what we're talking about today in terms of innovation, science, technology policy, industry policy. So I'll try and highlight some of the key areas of work across the organization that are maybe relevant for our discussions today. And again, thank you to the Latvian authorities, the Commission, the Committee of the Regions, and all those who participated in bringing us together here today. So first I thought I would talk a little bit about some just general background trends that we might want to keep in mind as these strategies are implemented, and also as they are, in a sense, updated on an ongoing basis, because presumably there's some feedback learning mechanisms that will be taking place. And then a little bit on implementation issues, and then maybe a couple examples from the United States. So one of the areas of work at the OECD that might be interesting for people to think about is the work on global value chains and trade and value added. Unfortunately, we don't have this broken out at regional level, but the idea being that if we could get a better understanding of where value added is achieved in different parts of the value chain, it might help us in thinking about the positioning of different regions. And there's been a lot of academic research about unbundling and how different tasks are broken out in these value chains, and it created a lot of opportunities for many EU regions. It's true that now they're starting to look, even at the OECD, as to whether maybe this unbundling went too far, and maybe there's a need for co-location, because maybe some of this unbundling of tasks was useful for a particular round or a generation of technologies, but maybe for the next round it's good to have them located in the same place. So that might have some impacts on how we think about the regional positioning. Another issue may be knowledge-based capital. There was a report that came out talking about the fact that actually in some of the advanced economies there's actually a greater investment in data, software, patents, trademarks, copyrights, firm-specific skills, design, and other areas that are often less easy to program into our instruments. And it's something that also raises issues about the types of engagement beyond science and technology. And maybe just to give an example, I have a couple of friends who are anthropologists, PhDs in anthropology. They work for a financial services firm. And why do they do that? Because the financial services firm thinks about how can we package our products based on the concepts of of ritual, which are part of the anthropological core training, to better sell our products and be more productive. So there are all sorts of opportunities that can come out in these strategies that are maybe sometimes missed because we're not thinking in those terms. Another report that should be coming out soon on data-driven innovation, and I know there's some session later on open innovation issues, but it's true that a lot of the work on this data-driven innovation highlights actually the regulatory barriers which were raised earlier this morning. And so in the context of these smart specialization strategies, identifying what are some of these regulatory barriers that need to be removed to combine them will be pretty, I think, pretty important for getting the most out of these efforts. Some of the research on the productivity of firms that's been coming out that shows that actually we have this challenge of productivity stagnation in many OECD countries. And what they're finding is actually not that the leaders are still becoming more and more productive. The problem is the difference between the leaders and the firms that are not converging to this productivity frontier. And in some cases, you might make that analogy with regions as well. But we still have to think more about what we can do for these firms that are not converging to the frontier. In terms of long-term trends, and we're going to try and do some more research on that to give you some figures in the future, but there are pressures for concentration of activity, different types of science innovation activity, and there are pressures for collaboration. We haven't fully understood sort of these competing impacts on regions, but it's true that it's hard to see over time the radical shifts. A lot of things stay relatively constant in terms of the relative position of regions, but if you go down to very specific areas, you can start to see, and that's where maybe this data and the monitoring will be helpful, because I'll give an example from Catalonia. We could see over time, over 30 years, that their integration into co-patenting networks in a particular sector they were prioritizing, you could see that that actually was taking hold, but you have to go down to a sort of level of detail in the data that maybe we're not as used to doing in the regional work. Maybe another background point is that ultimately this, and also for political buy-in, this is about growth in jobs. And some of my colleagues are sometimes provocative and say to me, well, Karen, what makes you think innovation will actually create jobs? And so so we still, I think, are not fully understanding all of these connections and then the types of jobs, because inequality among people is becoming a very hot topic. It's part of the OECD just released a new report on inequalities being at its highest levels in decades, and so thinking about how these smart specialization strategies will have an impact on growth in jobs, because while it makes sense, and I think a paper by the Joint Research Center showed an analysis of the different priorities and the strategies for the smart specialization. It's not finalized because they weren't all finalized, but it was a sort of an overview at that point in time, and it showed that actually a lot of the strategies are prioritizing areas. They're not necessarily the largest parts of the economy, which according to the report sort of makes sense in the sense that if you're trying to push development into related areas, they're not yet the biggest parts of your economy. On the other hand, we have to think about maybe a bit more how to increase the productivity in those areas that do have big shares of our economy, because ultimately for growth and jobs, this is also going to be important. Now, one strategy can't do everything, and so we can't put too many competing pressures involved, but sometimes that's part of the punchline that's going to get, I presume, some of the political buy-in. In terms of some considerations in implementation, I would say, the OECD has been doing a lot of work in the regional development world on what we call functional regions, whether it's defining what is a metropolitan area, and actually that was work done with the European Commission, or rural-urban partnerships, how are urban-rural relationships, and in some cases whether that, often this is focused not on innovation per se, but there might be areas there. And then also we've done some work, and my former colleague Claire Newellers in the room can also give you feedback on this project that looked specifically at cross-border regions, which for the European context are pretty important because a lot of you have borders with each other, and some of your regions on the border, in some cases, it may be interesting to look right on the other side of the border, but there were lots of barriers for political reasons, for programmatic reasons. There's sort of a tendency to focus on which funding pot goes to which purpose, and so I don't want to use structural funds if that's an interreg issue, you know, the different types of things that would come up. Even if they were allowed to allocate a proportion to cross-border, they weren't doing so necessarily. So, so on this work on the functional regions, I think it's, you know, in terms of the proximity elements of the smart specialization strategies, how to build on proximity for innovation is one area. And then I think what the interesting area that we know less about, which is something that I think is part of the new initiatives, is these interregional networks where it's not a proximity based on geography, but a proximity based on technology or something else. And that'll be, I think, very interesting to see how that works and how those dynamics are going to be different between knowledge networks, which are often very international, versus getting the place-based impacts of jobs associated with some other forms of networks. In terms of also just trying to put together, regions are often struggling to pull different pots of money from EU, different EU sources, national sources, regional sources, etc. One of the things that just perennially comes up is how the different pots of money, how we create our own barriers to being able to combine them, to use them in ways that are most effective for the region. And that's something that's, I mean, it's true when you look at the cross-border, you could see that actually there was not only an administrative but a psychological barrier. If you looked at patent citation spillovers, you could see that actually the border wiped out all the proximity benefits in terms of the likelihood of citing a patent on the other side of the border. So this sort of issues associated with proximity, with administrative barriers, and with other issues. How much time do I have? Just 2 minutes, 3 minutes, okay. I think also there have been some different papers by the Joint Research Center and some other issues about what are the roles of different key actors in these different strategies. And I think, you know, universities we've seen in our regional innovation reviews, which predated the word smart specialization, but we're trying to look at different innovation strategies of regions. In some cases, universities were sort of too much burden was put on them in expectations of what they could do for the region as institutions, and in some cases maybe they weren't as engaged enough. So I think there'll be, but one thing that came out in these and other work from our education group is just that the incentives for universities are not necessarily aligned always with some of the expectations for their engagement in these regional strategies, and understanding how to adjust those incentives, which are often out of the hands of a region, but are sort of national conditions, and then peer review research, is going to change a bit the different forms of engagement they can play in these smart specialization strategies. Maybe just to end on a couple of examples, we did a review of the Chicago tri-state metropolitan area, and there are two examples of how political interest in this sort of areas of innovation specialization. The first example I'll give is the Water Council in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and this is something that might not have come up on the radar screens due to sort of big picture cluster location quotient type analyses, but local leaders said, you know, we have a history of using a lot of water with food and beverage manufacturing. We have a lot of fresh water nearby, and actually our university has some competencies in fresh water. We really need to put this all together. And that, I think, helped capture a bit the imagination of some of the local politicians in a way that is different from sometimes the more analytic initiation. Now, obviously, we have to track. Maybe this doesn't overall make sense, but it is an opportunity to build on what they had. Another one in Chicago, where the IT industry, usually when you think of the United States, you don't think of Chicago and IT necessarily. You think of maybe the coasts. And they were actually very upset that a lot of their Chicago natives were leaving for the coasts. And then a firm called Groupon took off, and it totally changed the perception of political leaders about the role of IT in the economy. And then they started to see that actually they were very good at IT in business-to-business relations, because that's sort of a specialty of Chicago as a sort of hub of headquarters and businesses and logistics. So so these were different ways of, in a sense, capturing the imagination in order to get this maybe more embedded into big picture strategies. And I guess maybe I'll just end with a comment about the fact that these smart specialization strategies are in a sort of bigger picture. And often, you know, skills issues are important to keep in mind, because they're not always managed by the same authorities and the same strategies. And yet, actually, the OECD research on regional growth shows that that actually it's the share of low-skilled workers more than the share of high-skilled workers that's the drag on growth. And so that just leaves us some context for we're working often at the high-skilled end, but we still need to think about what's going on at the other end of the spectrum in order to get the sort of overall growth and jobs objectives that I think are desired by some of these funds.
Thank you very much, Karen. I like the example where you mentioned that you need to capture also the imagination of the local politicians, and it's not only an analytical exercise done by researchers or scientists in the region, but it's also about the political environment. I also found this example of anthropologists designing financial products. A bit scary, but very interesting. Very interesting. Let us now come to Günther Klar. When I introduced the speakers, I was not quite correct. He's not the chairman of the Commission Expert Group on Smart Specialization, but the chairman of the Commission Expert Group on the assessment of smart specialization strategies for the 28 member states. And it's also very interesting. He's from a region which is probably the most innovative region in Europe, I would say. When you pass by Stuttgart and Tübingen in this region, you see IT firms, and you see world market leaders in every industry you can imagine, just in a distance of a few hundred meters or almost. Everything is full of exploding firms and businesses, so it's probably a very inspiring environment for your task, and we are very eager to find out how the strategies are implemented in member states and what your findings are, Günther.
Thank you, Christoph, for this motivating introduction, and good morning to all of you. I just can agree with the motto of our conference: it's time to act. But the work of our expert group clearly showed it's not time for business as usual. And this expert group was established by DG Research, the unit of Dimitri Korpakis, one of these hosts of this conference. And we had really different aspects. Do we have the slide here? No, it doesn't matter. We should look at the contribution of these strategies to the Europe 2020 growth strategy. So not doing the assessment work, the formal assessment work. We are not involved in these processes, but we should look from this higher EU 28 perspective on that. We have developed a broad spectrum of suggestions for the way forward, and this is operational suggestions, this is policy suggestions, but we also found it necessary to make structural suggestions which cannot be implemented immediately, but which should be addressed during this programming period, and maybe they could help to start the next programming period with on a better base. As Christoph mentioned, I come from a region which is quite successful in innovation, and so I think it's important to mention that research and innovation strategies for smart specialization are around for a long time. For a long time. If you take a medium-sized company nowadays, what do? They look where their strengths are, they assess their growth potential, and growth potential in globalized economy means, of course, looking outside, and they have to set their priorities because funds are limited, and then they have to implement the monitoring system. Maybe not the way the platform can do this, but they have to have the internal monitoring system because otherwise they go out of the market. So that's evident in a way, and if you have a successful cluster, it's the same story. And if you have innovation in successful region, it's also at the end what they are doing. They are doing smart specialization. So it's not a Commission invention, the smart specialization, but it could become a true EU innovation. Innovation, if we succeed to implement the essence of this approach in all regions, and specifically if we manage through this approach, truly adapt it, to integrate the less innovative regions in the European research area. Because then the contribution to Europe 2020 will really be much better than they are today. So, we have already heard more or less from different aspects what research and innovation strategies for smart specialization are. And of course, we looked in our review on do they really use a wide concept of innovation, not only looking at research and technology innovation, do they, after the strategy, develop a policy mix for implementation that is linked to the strategy and is based on the realities of the regions? Because sometimes we have seen they do their strategy and then the policy mix of implementation does not fit to the strategy. A key issue, and I think we agree all on this, is to work on a broad human capital agenda. You cannot do research, you cannot do innovation, you cannot do successful marketing and internationalization if you don't have the human resources. The human resources in the companies, the human resources also in administration. So you need an administration that is competent to establish a governance that enables the implementation of these support programs. So do we see this in the strategies? If we look at this human capital agenda, of course, then immediately the question is, are they able to develop strategies? Are they able to manage research and innovation strategies? So the question is, do we have the strategic capacities and do we have the methodological capacities to do this well? As Charlina mentioned, it's not the point of spending money, it's spending it wisely. And you can only spend it wisely if you know how to do this. Very important, and this aspect is not only in Europe, it's in the United States, it's all over the world, are the needs of the SMEs addressed. And I would really like to make the point, are the needs of the different types of SMEs addressed. We have high-tech startups, software companies that need a totally different approach than if you have small manufacturing companies somewhere in the outskirts and not in the city region. So different needs of different types of SMEs. If we talk now about smart specialization strategies in cohesion policy, the question is, of course, do they really understand that societal challenges can be drivers of economic growth? How can you use the societal challenges in your region as a driver for economic growth? Openness. I talked about this mid-sized company in the beginning. Of course they look at the global market. Do the regions look what's happening outside their region, their continent, what's happening along the value chains that could be profitable for them? So openness means looking outside your region. Openness means also looking beyond the policy fields. It's not only research and innovation policy, it's social policy, it's education policies, it's financial support policies. So are they able to look beyond the different policy fields? And of course in Europe, are they able to look what's happening at the national level, what's happening at the European level? And what is very important for me to check is there a coherent line from analysis to strategy to to implementation, to a new analysis, what comes after that. And a very simple thing to look at for us was, is there a dedicated WIS3 budget? So as you can already see from my introduction where we looked into, the conclusion is that we see on the political, on the high-level political level, that the EU is moving in the right direction. There are changes that are going in the right direction to keep Europe in business. And we see a lot of very motivated and very motivating initiatives that started in the regions. So this is clear, there is progress, but it's still a very bumpy road ahead. And the divide has been mentioned from Wolfgang Burtscher to other contributions. We see more progress in regions that are already advanced. So the divide is there, and we are not sure if all regions have taken the new approach seriously, that they should focus on their strengths and on their reality. And many regions still try to copy the advanced region, and this is not the road to progress. So if I go in some concrete suggestions now, the first message to the cohesion policy community, the first key message is, if you are tasked with doing research and innovation strategies, you should really work with the research and innovation community. It is a it's really daring, you know, that policy, a high political level decides you, managing authority, now have to do research and innovation strategies. With managing authorities that sometimes do not have much experience in research and innovation field, that do not have many human resources. So work together with the research innovation policy, together with research and innovation support organization, and work together with the research and innovation organizations themselves. This is the key message to the cohesion policy community. If we look at the regions and the results that we had looked, we could not assess research and innovation strategy as defined by cohesion policy in all regions, because not all regions and countries had finalized them. So in some cases, we had the agreements with the Commission, and they say they will finalize it. I think this is a good thing, that many have not finalized their strategies, because now they can look what has happened somewhere else. And I would suggest they should look not only on the structural funds WIS3, they should also look on the WIS3 going on outside the structural funds. The entrepreneurial discovery process is another key issue. I agree that it's important, but there is a high risk that this gets either a tick-the-box exercise or very myopic. Sometimes we see the SW of SWOT is done well, the OT is kind of, and the real need for more foresight type approach and impact assessment approach is not there. So there is a need for methodological guidance, and I think the platform has a very important role, not only monitoring these things, but really continue giving methodological guidance on this process. For all the regions, we would say, yes, relate to other strategy processes. Not saying relate to Horizon 2020, but look where in Horizon 20 are similar strategies forming, are similar consortia forming, try to learn from them. the word synergies is used very often, and sometimes we have very concrete suggestions. We have a very good guide for synergies that focuses mostly on Horizon 2020 and COSME. But we have other programs, the Connecting Europe facility, we have these employment and social innovation programs. And here in Latvia, where the presidency has put a focus on the Eastern Partnership, you should not forget we have European neighborhood instruments that could be used by the Eastern region, by the Mediterranean regions. And we haven't seen any reference to the European neighborhood instrument. For the regions in the Balkans, we have the pre-accession assistance. It is sometimes easy money, very easy money to get research money from these programs than going for a highly competitive call in Horizon 2020. So synergy, take synergy seriously, and I will finish now. We have so many suggestions and the report will come out soon, Dimitri, you said? Okay, so I will just leave it here and say it's time to act, and that means for us here discussing it's time to implement the RIS3 in a way that they contribute to the Europe 2020 goals through regional prosperity. This is the real goal. The challenge is we still need much more information. I see this in discussion how information is still not very common. We need not only more information, we need reform and the cooperation spaces that have been mentioned by the other speakers. We have to create more cooperation spaces. And that means, of course, if we address these challenges, then the opportunities are much bigger than we see them today, to increase the impact, because impact assessment is important as much in research innovation as in cohesion policy. Impact of own activities to increase, enlarge the contribution to Europe 2020, and of course the support agencies and the policymakers have also the responsibility to incentivize better cooperation in other areas with other actors, but they have to show how they cooperate, and that makes it easier for the other ones. And then the last thing that I mentioned briefly in the beginning, reforming not only cohesion policy, but the European 2020 strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Günther. I'm just going to give back some questions to the panelists in order to focus a bit more, go a bit more into detail. My first question to Günther, the integration of the strategy into the EU 2020, into the economic governance system established at EU level. What are your suggestions there? How can that be done?
I mean, if we start here in the cohesion policy field, of course, we said, yes, cohesion policy, what they could do in looking at their contribution, one thing you mentioned, I think you, Charlina, mentioned the shared management system. It is very important. We still have the biggest time for the cohesion policy for the operation program is still ahead of us. So we have many years that this shared management is really becoming a true partnership. That it's not only accountancy, do they spend the money the way they should spend the money, but really, really working in a partnership to adapt constantly in a good way to increase the efficiency of the spending. And as we were looking from a larger perspective, we had analyzed the whole process that we call cohesion policy knowledge transformation process. Cohesion policy knowledge transformation. You have the negotiations, and then you have the regulations, you have the base for working. You transmit this from Council and Commission into the regions. The regions have to absorb the regulation. They try to do their strategies. They have to give it back to the managing authority that is then negotiating with DG Regio. So this is a whole process, and it's interesting to see how the knowledge is transformed in this process. And we have seen that this process is still a very fragile process. So sometimes we have seen a very good entrepreneurial process but didn't end up in DG Regio. So our longer term suggestion is to analyze the process, to see where are the weaknesses in the process, and start already working on an improved process for the next programming period. So the Europe 2020 goes more directly. We have, and you all know this, we have different elements to achieve the Europe 2020 goals. We have cohesion policy, we have Horizon 2020, we have different elements that are either more regional, more transnational, more research innovation, more societal challenges. And this is good because we need different ways of approaching these goals. But what we see is that key conditions should be met to really improve the overall contribution to Europe 2020. And the first thing is to harmonize time frames. The semester process was already mentioned. The semester process is a very, very important process because it's a true partnership between the Commission and the Council or the Member States. It's an ongoing process, 6 months, every year it is repeated. But the operational programs, at the time being, they are agreed, and then it's very difficult to change them really, whatever the semester process says. And this is the first thing what I would say is harmonizing time frames. The other thing is the strategy processes. The strategy processes, they should also be harmonized. So don't get me wrong, the different elements should keep their strengths. Horizon 2020 will always be research and innovation. But the strategy processes and the evaluation processes, they should be better harmonized. And so this is what I would say. We have more concrete suggestions, but I think the key thing is time frames, strategy, and evaluation. And then, of course, we hope that the cohesion policy is leading to reforms in other elements of Europe 2020. This is very important that we learn from cohesion policy. And if you know the blueprint for a new Europe 2020 by the Committee of the Regions, they have made very, very clear suggestions how to reform other parts of the Europe 2020 strategy.
Karen, one question. You mentioned the involvement of the private sector in smart specialization strategies. Can you elaborate that a bit more?
Yeah, well, I think maybe just a general observation, because we've looked at different strategies with, they might have different names, not all smart specialization, but are focused on trying to develop innovation-driven growth in the region. And what we see often is that there's a bit of an excessive public sector influence in the European examples relative to some of the other examples, and that this is in part, if you go to different places, and you ask to look at their documents, sometimes just the language and the way they're drafted, it's more of a public administration exercise, and maybe behind it there was a lot of engagement in the process of developing the strategy, and then it just gets translated by certain people in the drafting. But it wasn't sure that they were taking as strong a leadership role as we've seen in some other places. And I think even just to give you an example, even the delivery of some of these, not necessarily very specific research innovation, but regional development more generally, there was a case at the border of the US and Mexico that was involved in our cross-border projects, and they even said, you know what, the public sector, they were so arguing again, you know, amongst themselves in this cross-border region that the private sector said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take over some of these responsibilities, and we're going to do the identification and tell the public sector what we want to have done in order to make this this area work. And I think just finding ways of that ongoing process, because SMEs, well, okay, high-tech SMEs and incubators are easy to reach, okay? You know where they are, they're often getting money, and you know, they're articulate and etc. But often there's a challenge with the sort of general SME population and getting them represented in some of these kinds of consultation bodies and committees in the development of public sector strategies. And another thing that has come up in some of our committee discussions is that in regions that maybe are less dense in terms of population and economic activity, that you often have all of these different committees, but it's the same person on all of the committees. And so you end up having a challenge of trying to get different perspectives. And then maybe just also in terms of the types of institutions, but also the types of people. Even that we were talking with the person responsible for supporting innovation in Pittsburgh, for the mayor of Pittsburgh. And she was saying that actually she had a hard time linking the big firms that were, you know, sort of there for decades with the sort of ecosystem of new startup firms, and that there was sort of a cultural divide, and that she was having trouble getting them to sort of link together. So the public sector definitely can do a lot of interesting things to make this happen, but I think sometimes the leadership angle is a bit too much public sector driven in a topic where obviously it's the private sector that has to take the lead in commercializing innovations.
Thank you. Andrea, you mentioned also that the more sound analysis there is, the better the implementation. Other panelists mentioned also the fact that it's always easier to innovate in already innovative regions. Can you describe this a bit in your? Can you see this in your analysis, and what do you tell the lagging behind regions, what they can do in order to overcome these problems?
Well, I wouldn't, based on the experience, let's say on the ground, on the workshops, peer reviews we have made, I will not draw such a black and white distinction between the goods and the bad ones. We have experience of lagging regions which have done well in terms not only of participation to the different exercise, which provides clear inputs for those who are in charge of the design before implementation now of the smart specialization strategy, to share experiences and so on. But we had also some positive feedbacks in terms of the preparation of the strategy themselves, overall preparatory activities behind. Obviously, interacting with so many regions makes also almost natural to have an heterogeneous type of reply to quality response rate, let's say, to the call we make for a good design of the strategies. I'm optimist in the sense that we are running a novel exercise in which many different actors, for the effective success of the exercise, we need to put on board many different actors. So it's not something that we can measure on a quarterly basis. Let's say, we need to go through the whole process. We acknowledge that there are regions which have not moved with the speed that we aim at the beginning, so we will concentrate our efforts in that way. Let's say, below the different umbrella activities run by the platform, there are some initiatives which look at specific regions and member states, exactly because we think that the degree of responsibility we need to put in place in collaboration with those authorities is different according to the different needs that those regional member states have. So we will follow this process for the time being, trying to adopt as much as possible a flexible way of organizing our work in collaboration with them.
Thank you. Charlina, we've been speaking a lot about the human factor, the need for reform, the need to now implement the smart specialization strategies in regions. You mentioned that the money spent on innovation in the programs has gone up in past years. My question would be, I mean, when you talk to regions and you present the new programs and you tell them now is the time to act, now is the time to reform, now is the time to prioritize. Do they like that? Do they prioritize only the programs for the money DG Regio is giving them, or is it indeed a change of mentality in the regions that suddenly everybody thinks, yes, now we focus on only these points? How do you perceive this in the regions?
As a matter of fact, there is always a reluctance in the system to continue to do what have been done for years. And I have to say that one of the challenges now is that we are trying to change the growth model. At least we're trying to change what we are supporting as a growth model. Because if you look into the cohesion policy track record, it has been so much infrastructure so far. I'm not trying to underestimate the need of transport, environment, and all this type of infrastructure. But now we want to really concentrate on knowledge-based economy. And of course, there is a bit of a reluctance, because whenever you have a support for years in certain areas, there is a build-up around. So it's not easy. So we have to work on that. It is a cultural change, maybe mentality change. Cultural change is too strong in order to shift the real focus and to make it dear to the heart of the managing authorities, the innovation and research. So there was here a statement that the managing authorities should work with the research and innovation communities. Indeed. But please, research community, make yourself dear to the managing authorities. Work with them. So it's a double effort. We have to work together. This commission now is very much about breaking silos. Everybody says that we understand how important it is. It is difficult to implement. So working together, this is the hardest thing that I've seen so far in the 6 years that I'm doing so many countries in my career. So bringing research with administration, bringing, for example, the macro-regional contact points with the managing authorities, these are things that are difficult to happen. And it has to become a modus operandi. Something that is of critical importance for us is that we make it work, we make the cooperation happen, we make the things happen on the edge of the sectors, because we are talking about value chains, we are talking about things that develop on the edge of sectors. This is the real potential for innovation. Again, working together is the key word. So let's work together. Let's make innovation and research dear to the heart of everyone involved, and I really hope that we're going to succeed and we will achieve the results that we've seen as exemplary indicators. We've tried our best by concentration of resources, obligatory concentration of resources to gear the process, but now it's really on the ground that this has to happen. So I will end up here with very good wishes for the conference. I hope that everything that we talked about will be at least food for thought, and let's be more result-oriented and more open in our working methods.
Thank you, Celina. Ladies and gentlemen, my apologies that we do not have time now to start the discussion here in the plenary. We will have lots of time to discuss, and I have plenty of questions noted down that I would like to discuss with them. We have a chance to discuss that during the lunch break. Before I have an important announcement to make for the lunch break, I would like to ask you, together with me, to thank all the panelists for this very interesting discussions. We are all looking forward to going more into detail in the afternoon sessions and tomorrow morning. So thank you very much. And the important announcement I have to make. There's also the launching of the Horizon 2020 widespread project. It's the teaming project Kamart in the lunch break, and it's in the Ligo Hall. So, bon appétit, guten Appetit.